Hey, I'm Srini, host and founder of the Unmistakable Creative Podcast and the creator of Maximize Your Output with Mem. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Airtable data to create content inside of Mem. And if you want to learn more about how to take smart notes, be sure to check out our free course at maximizeyouroutput.com/smartnotes. I'll be sure to include a link in the description below. Now, let's get to the video.
What we're going to do in this video is we are going to use data from Airtable to generate content inside of Mem. And there are a couple different use cases for why we might want to do this. So the example that I'm going to use here is a member profile. So we have a private social network called the Unmistakable Collective, where we publish a profile for one of our members every month in our mighty network. And I want to show you how to replicate that process inside of Mem and using Airtable data. So there are a couple of things that are important to note here. First, you have to get the data into Airtable. And you'll see here that I have an Airtable field right here where we have all these different questions about Daniel, who is our Unmistakable Collective member. And so we want to make sure that we have this. So you can either fill this in manually or you can have people enter it through a form. And there are a couple different use cases, and we'll go through one other one. In this case, we're going to go through publishing a member profile. So let's say, for example, you wanted to just create a profile list of all the people in your network and have various questions about them or want to know certain things about them. You could just create this sort of comprehensive overview of the people who are in your audience, for example. So in this case, we're going to work with Daniel. And so you'll see here, what we're going to do first is we're going to choose our app, which in this case is Airtable, and your trigger event, which is basically the thing that says, okay, when this happens, do this. That's going to be a new record. And obviously you want to connect it to your Airtable. And then you have to decide what the base it is. And the name of the base is basically Unmistakable Collective, as you can see here at the top. And then it'll ask you which table within the base. So you'll see here that you have different tables. In this case, we're going to do the member profiles table. And the other thing is that within each table, you can have different views. So you want to make sure that you select the right view. This is optional, but it can actually be useful if you want to do filtering inside of Airtable or any of that. So the first thing we have to do is we want to test the trigger. And you'll see here that it actually shows up, that Daniel's information is all in here. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and test the trigger. And because I've already tested it, I don't need to do that. But what it'll do is it'll make sure that there's a record in there, because if you're going to pull data into Mem, you need to actually have the data. So now what we're going to do is we're going to set up the action in Mem. Obviously, you want to make sure that you have all the data in here. So a couple things you'll see here. One is that Mem uses Markdown. So unlike other tools, you want to make sure that you use the Markdown format. So you can see here for an H1 tag, I use, just one £. And then you can see here for what do you do, the data isn't there. So what we can do is we can go ahead and add that in there. We're going to say, what do you do? And we're going to go ahead and pull that up here. And the nice thing, I think that in Markdown, you actually don't have to worry about spacing or break tags, but let's just go ahead and put them in using spaces. And now what we're going to do is we're going to tell it to create a mem. And we're going to go over to our inbox. And there's a slight delay between when you push the button on this and when it generates, but I'm going to use a split view here so we can see this show up. So now we have our Zap here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and retest. I've already tested this once. That's why it says retest, but it'll normally say test action. So if we do this, you'll see here that it has this thing running that says sent to Mem. And it says a Mem was sent to Mem just now. And there we go. We have Daniel's profile. And you can see here that it basically created all the formatting exactly as we wanted. And so we could pull in any kind of data we wanted to in this Mem. So this is super useful for certain things. Like I said, if you wanted to create, for example, profiles of your different customers or anything else, obviously it's not going to fix the spelling inside of Airtable. That's something you're going to have to do, but that's just because I have the Grammarly editor on that keeps showing up. But that's one way to do this. Let's look at one more example for how we might do this. So another example of how you might do this is, say, for example, you wanted to collect customer service data. So what I decided to do was to create a customer data example. And we're going to go ahead and turn off this split screen here for just a second. So we have this customer data example, and what I did was I actually put the customer data inside of this table right here. where I asked, what's your biggest challenge? So let's say that Dennis and the team at Mem decided they wanted to create a bunch of mems that allow them to look through different customer profiles and really understand what their customers wanted to get out of Mem. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing again. We're going to set up our trigger. And you can see here that we chose the maximize your output base, which is the name of this base right here. And we chose the customer data example and we loaded it to our grid view. And we want to test our trigger. And you can see here that it has everything that we wanted inside of it already. So now what we want to do is we want to set up our action so that we have all the things that we want to get in here. So basically what we want to do is make sure that we match the right data with the right question. So in this case, we want to make sure that what's your biggest challenge? We have the biggest challenge answer. How do you use Mem? You want to make sure that you pick how do you use Mem? And then we're going to go ahead and create another H3 tag for the question. What's your goal with Mem? Or what's one goal you want to accomplish with Mem? So now we have all of this set up inside of our Zap so that it will generate the document or Mem inside of Mem with all that content. So we're going to go ahead and continue. And let's go ahead and test this one more time here. We can see if we retest this action. So the reason I'm seeing retest is because I've been testing this out beforehand. And if you go here, you can basically see that we've got all of John Smith's customer profile information. And that's a very basic overview of how you use Airtable data to create content or generate information inside of Mem.